What is up, everybody? It is Thursday night, which means we just finished with another epic Teach Better / Mastery chat. It was absolutely incredible. We've got the amazing moderator, Alexis Shepard, here with us tonight that's going to walk us through everything that she just experienced. I was playing along online as well, watching Teach Better chat, commenting, and just getting completely overwhelmed by all of the amazing people out there that were contributing tonight in our conversation about learning loss. So if you are coming to join us and you want a quick recap on what you missed, or just want to recap on the conversation you were just a part of, sit tight, relax, and in 52 seconds, we'll be back. See you soon. Alexis, I don't know if you know it, but I can watch you dancing back there when that music's playing. I see you grooving out there. Well played.
It's the jam. Okay, it's the mood.
8:30 our time here at night, and you're feeling full of life. I love it. I love it. Before we went live, you came on. You said, "Whoa, that was crazy. That was fast." This is that 30 minutes of Teach Better chat is the exact opposite of the last 2 minutes of a football game. The last 2 minutes of a football game, it feels like it just goes on forever. The 30 minutes of Teach Better chat goes by like that. And there's no way you can process it all.
There's not. And I'm trying to be all good and answer because there's just so many good ideas and you want to respond to all of them and you want to engage with all the people. And there's so many great ideas. And literally I got to question 2 and I was like, okay, so we're going to have to start scrolling because you're your tweets are posting and you're not able to see and respond. It was insane, but so much good stuff. It's
right. Well, you set us up with an amazing chat tonight with the questions you asked and the dialogue. So if people that are watching right now, let's treat this like it's part of the chat still. So let us know who you are. Let us know where you're watching and where you're listening to. And if you got more questions that you want to insert into our chat here, feel free. So Alexis, while they're doing that, some people might have just come to the chat because they follow the hashtag Teach Better or hashtag Mastery Chat, and they were just engaged in the conversation today and didn't necessarily know who you were before you joined the chat tonight. Can you just give us a quick overview on who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Alexis, and I'm a 6th grade ELA teacher in South Carolina. This is my 9th year teaching, so been doing this almost a decade. And on social media, I am the Afro Educator, and I am all things teacher wellness and just teaching and living authentically, right? In a way where it's going to benefit you and your students, and that hopefully makes teaching more of a sustainable career because we know that that's dwindling.
Awesome. Well, middle school people are my people. Middle school ELA people. I was a middle school language arts teacher for a little bit of my career as well, a little bit like a decade as well. So I feel like we're kindred spirits here. So
yes.
This is going to be a fun conversation. I know a lot of other people are chiming in right now into the comments and saying, hey, got Mike saying, hey, Chelsea saying, hey, Livia saying, hey,
hi guys.
Brad, Sandra, so many awesome people were part of this conversation tonight, talking learning loss, or maybe I should say avoiding talking about learning loss, or rejecting talking about learning loss, or pushing back against learning loss.
Yes.
Awesome convo. So your theme tonight, learning loss, right?
Yes.
It's probably a question I don't even need to ask, but I'll ask it anyway. Why'd you want to talk about this tonight?
Well, I really have felt strongly about this since before reopening. So since last summer, I have been talking about this idea of learning loss because with the kids being out of school most of last spring, you hear all these things coming up, but the kids are missing so much. They're out of school. They're not attending. Look at all of the stuff that they're not learning. And I just remember being really, really frustrated with that because I knew the trauma that I was experiencing, but I also could feel that there were things that I was gaining, like time with, my husband, because usually we're like passing ships in the night because we're so busy, like resilience, like patience, like flexibility, like adaptability, like perseverance. I mean, there were all of these things that, even though, of course, I know those are like, long game lessons, I knew sort of cerebrally that those were things that I was gaining. And then on the tangible side of things, I could see where I had more time, right? Like I didn't love teaching virtually, but I had more space in my day and it gave me greater capacity to like do more things and to try to do the best that I could for my kids. So when it came to talking about learning loss and when I knew that we were going into the summer with that narrative, I just knew that it didn't bode well for the school year. And so I had felt strongly about this for about a year. And when I, finally got down to like thinking about what I wanted to talk about with this mastery chat, I was like, this is my chance to engage with other people around this, because here's the thing. I actually don't really have people in my community who subscribe to this notion. And so I'm kind of on this island, where I'm talking about rejecting learning loss and everybody else is like, but the kids are so behind. What are we going to do? And I'm like, we're going to like chill.
Alexis, first of all, again, you are my people here. And you're surrounded by people that are feeling the same passions that you are right now. So I know that there are other people out there that feel like at times you're at work and you're on a bubble and nobody quite sees things the same way that you do, but that's what the Teach Better family is all about. We come together because we see these things and we hear these things, and we want to put voices like yours up there to speak so that other people can hear them just as well. You're saying some things right now that are resonating with me so much. So let me first say thank you for not just sitting back saying, well, this isn't the conversation everybody wants to have. All the politicians and the bureaucrats and the pundits are talking about this, so we just have to embrace it. I appreciate that you're saying, nope, doesn't have to be that way. So thank you for that. Secondly, I think there's also a bit of irony in all of this for a lot of reasons. And I'm going to weave this into some of the questions you asked in just a second. So if we were to go back, not even a year ago, I'm going to take us back 5 years ago, 6 years ago. In schools all across America, people were saying our kids need to learn grit. They need to learn perseverance and stamina. Like these were the buzzwords of the day. Over the last year and a half, guess what our kids have had to learn? Grit, perseverance, and stamina. But then people rejected it and said, no, but that's not how I wanted them to learn it. I wanted them to learn these things by doing longer worksheets and reading bigger books, not in the real world. Now, granted, I don't think either one of us wanted the world to experience a pandemic so our kids could learn this.
No.
But they did learn this. And that is something for us to embrace instead of sweep under the rug. So I love that you're pulling that out. Secondly, I want to address the pundits and the politicians and the bureaucrats, the ones who 6 months ago were already saying our kids have lost so much, and then said, and we know all of this, so we're going to give a test to prove it. So a lot of states gave these big end of the year nasty tests to prove something that they were already saying a year ago existed. So why do they have to give the test if they already knew the answers? But again, that's something for another day.
And here's the thing, and with data that is not valid. I'm just going to put it out there. The data from these standardized tests is not valid because there are a lot of things that it doesn't take into consideration. Our kids who were virtual all year and never stepped foot into the school building had to step foot into the school building for standardized testing. And because I'm a sixth grade teacher, these kids are also kids who have never actually been in the physical middle school setting. So it's a whole thing. So there's that element. There's the fact that standardized tests are already inequitable. Whole other Teach Better chat for a whole other day, right? But we're going to use this data to like say that, oh, look what our kids haven't learned. Okay, so you're going to be able to aggregate that, right? Or disaggregate that from, the scenario that I'm talking about, from the kids who are at home helping and watching their siblings, from, the inequity that's already inherently there. Like, make it make sense from the fact that, mind you, our kids haven't taken standardized tests since 2019, since spring 2019. in my in my school, I had to make a correlation between my students' standardized test scores from 2019 and their grades from this school year. Like I was supposed to somehow make and draw conclusions.
I feel like there's a webinar series in here somewhere where we need to be talking about grades and focusing on the focus. But I'm going to try my best not to take the bait on that, because people that know me know that I will go off on this and completely just push you out of the way and start talking. So I'm gonna avoid debate here, Alexis, because again, you're speaking my language, and there's so much that I want to go deeper on with that. So if there's time, I'm going to circle back. I'm going to write myself a note. But you asked a question tonight that I think was super powerful. And it's a question that came towards the end of the chat tonight that I want to pull out, because the chat was flowing. You were asking some amazing questions, and I know people's thumbs were on fire. And then you threw out this question. I have TweetDeck loaded. That's where I follow this. And I don't want to say that my scroll slowed. It came to a stop. The question.
I know where you're going.
For a second. As if I'm assuming people just had to reflect and they had to think for a second and they weren't quite sure what to say. The question dealt with pre-existing inequities. Can you paraphrase the question that you asked and then talk to me about why you asked that question? Because when we talk about learning loss, I think most people that are listening right now are saying, preach it, I got you, I know exactly what you're saying. Our kids gained some things, change the narrative. But then you pulled out this question about learning loss and how that narrative impacts pre-existing inequities. I'm intrigued. Go for it.
Okay. So our current system, right? Our current educational system here in the States, there are certain parties, and we can break this up into several areas. So I'm going to take, children coming from poverty backgrounds, and then Black and brown children, right? Mm. I think we can also say that there's some intersectionality there. Our children from poverty are not always Black and brown children, but we know that poverty impacts Black and brown children disproportionately. We also know that Black and brown children are disproportionately exclusionarily disciplined. We also know that children that come from poverty, again, not always Black and brown students, but there is some crossover there, also come from backgrounds of poverty and are more likely to be exclusionarily disciplined. When you are exclusionarily disciplined, so I'm talking in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, detention, suspension, expulsion, you're not in a classroom setting to be able to learn, right? The more that happens, the less learning, right? If we're talking about it in terms of learning loss is happening. That's been happening. The statistics and the data that I'm citing are old, right? Like those are things that we know. But it's interesting because we're only starting to talk about learning loss now that it affects a wider community, and it's not just limited to the smaller subsections of the population. So my thing was, how is the pandemic compounding those already existing issues? And it's so funny that you mentioned that, because I noticed that too, because, I was talking about the craziness of the scroll, and I was scrolling, and eventually like I caught up. When question 4 had been posted, and it had been a few minutes, I caught up and I was like,
Because it's a hard question. You're looking at me. I'm a 43-year-old white man, right? And I'm looking at this question and I'm thinking, oh, she just went there. And I don't know the right way to answer. I said the white way, right? But I don't know the right way to answer this question. Because it's a difficult question to answer, because it confronts you. The question slapped me across the face because of what you just addressed right there. That, we've been saying now for a long time that the pandemic didn't necessarily bring out any new problems. It simply exposed problems that have always been there. Yeah. But what it did was it exposed these problems to a new population that hadn't quite experienced these things before. And now we're going to talk about them, because now it's impacting all kids. These things used to impact populations of kids that, to be quite honest, some of us just, it wasn't a big enough issue for us to address, but now it is.
Right.
And now we're getting all the politicians throwing money our way. Now everybody's saying it's something we got to try to address. Now is the time for us to rally the troops and keep our kids in school forever and extend the day. And people are saying, where were you 5 years ago? Where were you 10 years ago?
Exactly.
So what do we do now? Now that we've angered the hornet's nest, and now that we've got the resources flowing in, what do we do with this?
I mean, so the first thing is, I think we have to make noise about it. And when I say make noise about it, I think when people think about you using your voice or making noise about it, right? Like you're afraid of being the squeaky wheel, and you think that raising your voice about it makes you seem like you're complaining. But here's the difference. And this is what I consider the difference between what I do and what I say and what people perceive, is that I don't make noise without at least having suggestions or strategies that we can start to work towards solutions. So I'm not arrogant enough to think that like, hey, I'm coming to you with the solution to the problem. But I am saying that I'm confident enough to say, okay, I don't exactly know what the solution to this problem is, but let's have this discussion. There are already some inequities here that exist. Number one, let's talk about what those are, because I also believe that if you don't have the impetus to really think about what those pre-existing inequities were before, then you have it now. And so now is really the time to develop an awareness around that, because then, I don't know about you, but it also makes me think like, okay, so now that I have this awareness, how does my lens look when I'm reflecting on my practice before, right? Like, do I find that I am, is my first go-to to like send my kids out into the hallway, or to, because that's a whole other thing when we talk about behavior management in the classroom, like soapbox, I'm going to stay off of it. But yeah, so I think it's creating an awareness, and then I think it's being empowered to actually bring those conversations to the forefront with our leaders. But here's the thing, that's uncomfortable. And sometimes you can feel like an island, and sometimes you can feel like you are alone in that. So like, I just recently had a situation where I addressed my school board at a school board meeting about this. And it has been a little isolating because I am the only one who is, mentioning this. And again, I'm not accusing or, like angrily pointing fingers, but it's like, hey, this is my experience. This is my perspective. This is the experience of like these populations of students in this community. And these are some ways that I think that we could look at making this better, at opening up the conversation and doing better. And there was swift backlash.
I'm sure. Yeah. Well, I appreciate the way that you brought up this conversation, even just within our community tonight, through the safety of a Twitter chat. That then leads to more conversation, allows us to then talk about it a half hour afterwards, because I think this is the first step to enlarging that conversation and making it a full dialogue across schools, across districts, across communities, and truly internationally. Now we've got people that are watching this all across the world that are now thinking about this conversation a little bit differently, because they now have this new awareness. Because if we're not aware and we don't start driving the narrative, somebody else will. Somebody else has. And the prime example is just this word loss that you made the focus of your entire chat tonight. I put somewhere in the chat that loss and data are 2 4-letter words that we use in school that we have completely perverted in schools. Mm-hmm. Loss and data used to be innocent words. They used to be words that you could just use interchangeably. But like all 4-letter words in the English language, they get perverted and their meaning gets twisted when you allow other people to do so. It's up to us to learn how to use data so that we can have an informed conversation about what the data really says. Otherwise, others will take data that they don't understand and start telling us that kids have lost something that they never had. Right. So I appreciate you just bringing things to the surface today and saying, just educate yourself, people, and then start the conversation.
Thanks. So I appreciate that. And to add to your lovely sermon there. And I think also looking at the ways that we choose to define learning, or the definitions that we choose to accept of learning. Somebody in the chat mentioned this, and it kind of sparked this thought for me. Like, who decided that like learning looked like I sit inside this school building for this amount of hours a day, and that's what learning is. And so when we've even framed this idea of learning loss, we're talking about the fact that kids aren't in a physical classroom hearing from a teacher in person And so that's what we're defining as learning. So are we saying that kids can't learn in their homes with their parents? Are we saying that kids are incapable of learning things on their own through social interactions with their friends? Are we saying that, kids are not learning just from their environment and the knowledge of what's going on, like situationally? We have to look at that and expand it, because I feel like if you accept the narrative of learning loss, then number one, you have a very narrow definition of what learning is, which is problematic. And then number two, you're not setting your students or yourself up to win, because you're automatically coming at this with a loss mindset.
Yes, so good. The idea of teach better implies that we want to do things better. We're going to get better. We're going to continually improve. And I think that part of the narrative of loss has been brought forth because we want to go back to what was instead of moving forward to what could be. And I think this comes from a lot of different angles, that we look at the fact that school was different this year. And in some ways, it probably was not as good. We have to admit there were some huge obstacles.
Absolutely.
But for us to then say that we lost implies that we weren't capable of finding gems and diamonds in the rough and finding things that I hope we do carry forward. Mm-hmm. I hope we do find some things in this loss that allow us that we hold on to and we embrace. And next year, 21-22 becomes the best year ever, because we've applied the things we gained this year to the things that we were doing in the past. So let's capitalize on that and run forward. So Alexis, throughout the chat, you had the opportunity, like I said, to read a lot of comments, to see a lot of messages sent your way. Was there anything that really resonated with you? Was there a big theme or one specific comment or anything that you pull out and say,
oh my gosh,
this is the thing I'm going to hold on to today?
Yes. Okay. Let me pull this up. There were a couple of things. I mean, this was a fury of likes. And okay, let me, because there were a couple things I want to point out. So one thing was about labels and how we're quick to put labels on something because we feel like, okay, but if I can label it this thing, right? If I can diagnose it with this name, then I can begin to solve it. But there's never any thought to like go back and think, but am I even putting the right label on this? Like, because putting a label on it doesn't solve the problem if the label is a problem in the first place. But it's interesting because that's what we always jump to. And I noticed that, politicians, leaders, et cetera, and just I think society in general are really quick to be like, learning loss. The kids aren't learning. Look how behind the kids are. And it's like, but first of all, has it really been enough time for us to even assess what they do and don't know? And then are we going to judge that loss based on their grades, which, we're going to have a separate conversation about that, because I feel that same way. If it were up to me, I would have a gradeless classroom. I struggle every quarter to make the minimum and, the minimum number of grades I'm supposed to have in my grade book because of my beliefs about assessment and what that should look like and pushing back against the system. But side note. Okay.
What's interesting on that, Alexis, real quick? I'm gonna take a little rabbit trail. I'm gonna take the bait on this one. So in my day job, doing things like this, I'll be real and say it was a challenge for me. My entire day job got flipped on its head over the last 15, 16 months. But I don't see anybody out there telling me that I have to go out and work overtime for the next 6 months so that I can learn the skills that I could have learned over the last 15 months. Nobody's saying I have work loss, that I lost career skills because my work life got disrupted over 15 months. So why we're now saying kids have to do it, but not the adults is whatever. Right. But carry on, Alexis. Right. I'm sorry.
Listen, I'm glad that you took that trail down the rabbit hole, because it is just you're right. We're like so like-minded here. Okay. The other thing that stood out to me was Terrence Tong from, I think it's in South Korea, said the term learning loss discredits all non-quantifiable learning and growth students achieved the last 16 months. And he specifically mentioned resiliency, adaptability, and grit, which you mentioned. And I thought about this when you said it. One cannot measure with percents or standards. And you can't. And that's what I've always wondered. Like, when you look at my standardized test scores and you're trying to see, like, did your students experience growth? Because we have to do all of this data analysis to show that our students have grown, right? And it's all about how many points did you score in the fall? How many points did you score in the spring? And did you increase, right? And but those tests don't measure any of that. Those tests don't measure how, so-and-so came into my classroom in August and was unable to have a conversation with someone that thought differently than he did, without getting angry. And now he can have that conversation and articulate his point and, do so in a calm state where he's able to openly listen and then effectively respond. You can't measure that because the test doesn't, that's not assessed. There's no assessment for that. And that really struck me because we say, and this is my sermonette for the day, we say, and people say, and society says, we want better for the future. We want our tomorrow to be better than today. There are all these cliches that exist about how we want the world to be. And it's very apparent to me that people think that it's just going to happen. I don't know, the Thanos snap is going to happen and people are all of a sudden going to be more, determined and have more perseverance and, be more compassionate. That's not how that works. We have to model that and we have to unlock that potential in our students by showing them how to do that, by giving them opportunities, by helping them explore what their strengths are. Because the reality is our kids already know their weaknesses. Middle schoolers, you go up to any middle schooler, they will tell you all the things that they are not good at. I'm not good at math. I hate doing this. I'm not good at this. I can't do this. So we actually don't need to focus, in my opinion, as much on what they can't do because they know. And help them exploit those things that they can do and using those things to build that confidence to empower them to do better in those other areas. But I feel like the way that we do school right now is so focused on what you can't do, what you don't do, and filling in gaps that all of that gets neglected.
Alexis, I feel like you could go out and you could write a series for Netflix because you do this amazing job of sucking people in right at the end there. And then you're like, good luck, wait for the sequel. With the chat, you built up to it. And I was like, oh, I can't wait to talk to her. And now you just built up. And I'm like, oh, I need another conversation with you now. You got me going here. And I'm looking at the clock and I know that I'm supposed to be signing off right now. But I want to continue this conversation in the future, okay? Know that you're going to be one of my new besties. You're going to be pushing me away real soon because I've got so much I want to learn from you. Okay.
Listen, I'm for it. I'm all about some community. So come on.
Done. Now, other people that want to connect with you, how do they find you? How do they connect with you? How do you want them to communicate with you all summer long and keep growing?
Yes. Okay. So it's so funny because this mastery chat, reinvigorated my thing with Twitter. But I am on Twitter at The Afroeducator, but I am primarily on Instagram at the same handle at The Afroeducator, posting the same edgy stuff related to, all things education and teacher wellness and all of that. So if you want more of that content, I post very regularly there and I come on, slide in my comments, slide in my DMs. We can engage around some stuff. I love chatting with people. I have made so many internet besties that way. So y'all come on and be a part of my world.
Awesome. Alexis, you killed it tonight. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule at the end of the school year like this, just to keep on building us up and making us all better. For everybody that participated in the chat tonight or you're just catching this recap, go out there, connect with Alexis, continue to grow your community, lean into each other, and remember, be a little bit better tomorrow than you were today. Have an awesome night, everybody. And Alexis, thanks again.
Thank you.